Next, we will have a dynamic panel discussion with 4 Maine business owners that promises to be an uplifting conclusion to our conference. We're going to take a short break to get our panelists set up, and we appreciate your patience. And we'll see you back here shortly for Andrea Ginchette-Maker as the moderator, with panelist Scott Wellman, the CFO of Puritan Medical Products, Amber Lamke, founder and CEO of Maine Grains, Seth Weber, principal at Barry Dunn, and Brianna Warner, president and CEO of Atlantic Sea Farms. I'd like to introduce our panel moderator, Andrea Ginchette-Maker. Andrea is an attorney at Pierce Atwood, and we are happy to have her as our public policy counsel. Andrea, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. And I also want to start with a thank you to the panelists for taking the time to share their stories with us over the next few minutes. I am really delighted to have enjoyed this morning's conversation. We've had a rich morning of information on Maine's economic history, really, starting with Joshua Chamberlain and his projections for the state. We've also heard from Charlie Colgan about the current changes and challenges. And, you know, when Charlie Colgan can't predict the future, I'm not sure anybody can predict the future. So we are all in this together to work to create Maine's next economy and move us out of this pandemic. It's going to be really exciting to hear the stories of our 4 panelists because each of them has companies that are positioned to do just that. Before I begin, I want to thank Kim Hamilton for not only serving as a panelist, but for her kind words to me. I could send those kudos right back to her and the work that she's doing with us at Focus Maine. So let me begin by introducing each of the panelists by name. They are each going to present to you very brief slides on profiles of their companies. So I will leave them to talk to you about their companies to the extent I don't have to mention them in the introductions. So I'll start with Amber Lamke. Amber is the co-founder and president of Maine Grains. Amber, you want to wave to us? You're now on the screen. And Maine Grains is carried by specialty food stores and by breweries and bakeries and restaurants throughout the Northeast. I've also seen Maine Grains in Hannaford and Yarmouth recently, which is a nice transition for her company. Amber is also the founding director of the Maine Grain Alliance. This alliance is setting up with local business leaders and community members to bring the cultivation and the processing of grains back to Skowhegan, Maine. For those of you who drive up and down Interstate 95, I can tell you that Skowhegan is about 20 miles northwest of Pittsfield. In addition, Amber has established the Maine Kneading Conference, kneading as in bread kneading. And this conference has drawn thousands of attendees from North America to, I believe, Skowhegan, Maine for the conference. And it's also spawned other conferences around the country. So a true leader in what she's doing and a true believer in what she's doing. I will next introduce Seth Weber. Seth, give a little wave. There's Seth. So Seth is with Barry Dunn, where he is the head of their valuation group. In this role, Seth is heavily involved himself in working with clients to define and execute transition plans, including their valuations related to their ESOPs, management buyouts, sales, and gifting. And he also provides expert witness services to clients and attorneys on business valuations, economic damages, and lost profits. And Seth has a nice story to tell us about Barry Dunn's future plans for the state of Maine. Next, I'll introduce Brianna Warner. Little wave, Bree. Bree is the president and CEO of Atlantic Sea Farms. This is a kelp processor in Saco, Maine. Atlantic Sea Farms founders created the first commercially viable seaweed farm in the United States in 2009, with the goals to diversify how our coastal waters are used and to provide a domestic and fresh and healthy alternative to imported seaweed products. Bree interestingly served several tours in the U.S. Foreign Service And then she opened and ultimately sold a wholesale bakery in Portland focused on pies with an international flair and employing recent refugees who had settled into Portland and the area. Before taking the helm at Ocean Approved, the former name of Atlantic Sea Farms, in 2018, she was the Economic Development Director at the Island Institute. And finally, last but not least, is Scott Wellman. Scott is the acting CEO and CFO of both Hardwood Products Company and Puritan Medical Products Company in Guilford, Maine, about 40 miles northeast of Pittsfield. They also have new operations in Pittsfield that I'm sure he'll discuss with you. Prior to becoming the CFO of Piscataquis County's largest employer, Scott served as an auditor and financial consultant for MacPage, which is based here in Portland, Maine. So welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you again for joining us. Amber, could I invite you to share your screen and introduce Maine Grains to the audience?
Okay, sure. So my name is Amber. I'm the founder and CEO of Maine Grains. We're located in downtown Skowhegan, Maine. And Maine Grains is a grist mill where we are processing organic and heritage grains out of a repurposed former Somerset County jail building. This jailhouse was built in 1897, and after 2 years of working with our county commissioners to purchase the building, we were able to secure its purchase for $65,000, and it included a commercial kitchen where we feature a cafe today. This 4-story section that you can see in the slide allows us to send grain to the very top of the facility where we gravity feed through the milling machinery below. Our mill, which was began in 2012, is in its 9th year of operation and employs now 20 people in our downtown and an additional 15 more in the cafe that I mentioned earlier. We are joined in this building by a startup knit shop, a community radio station, a 25-year-old farmer's market, a creamery, and most recently, an entrepreneur making a new pizza dough product with our grains. As Andrea mentioned, this work begins for me after having been a co-founder with a grassroots group of organizers of the Kneading Conference, KNEAD, which is a gathering of farmers, millers, researchers, oven builders that now draws hundreds of attendees from around the world each year and has spawned similar conferences worldwide. We are focused on the revival of regional grain economies. We've been inspired by the work surrounding Skowhegan's designation as a Main Street community, an approach to revitalizing our downtown. Main Street is a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation that supports struggling rural communities after periods of economic decline to work together in a comprehensive approach to build a brighter future. At root, Maine Grains is reviving the cultivation and processing of grains back to the Northeast, with Skowhegan now serving as a hub. And we're establishing a broader understanding and appreciation of the flavor, nutrition, and environmental value of freshly milled organic grains. Maine Grains products are carried by specialty food stores and used by bakeries, breweries, and chefs throughout the Northeast. The infrastructure that we've now created in Skowhegan has made it possible for some of our favorite brands like Allagash and Standard Bakery in Portland and others to source their primary ingredients like wheat, oats, barley, rye, spelt, cornmeal from right here at home. And some of you might have read the recent opinion piece in the New York Times about us. Author Tim Wu makes a case that, or he contemplates the usefulness and success of companies like Maine Grains to meet essential basic human needs, particularly through this pandemic, and doing so at a scale that is making communities and even the soil and our natural resources more resilient. So I'm happy to share more as this panel conversation continues, and you can certainly read more about our story at maingrains.com. So I'll turn it back over to you, Andrea, for my partners to continue.
Thank you very much, Amber. So can I invite Seth to join, to share his screen and give us an overview of Barry Dunn in Maine?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the panel this morning. So a little bit about Barry Dunn in where we started. So for those that don't know, Barry Dunn is an accounting and consulting firm headquartered in Portland, Maine. And we got our start in 1974 during the oil shocks. And the reason I mention that is, as a firm, we've been through a couple of different calamities here. But at that time, in 1974, what was happening was national accounting firms were coming up into the Maine market and looking for independent firms to buy and consolidate in. The founders of Barry Dunn wanted to go a different way. They wanted to remain independent, and they thought that if they could serve local clients with national level talent, that we could go a long way. We could be very authentic to ourselves. So it's a little bit of the Maine story and the Joshua Chamberlain story of having a sense of place and having a sense of purpose. Since that time, we've grown to 51 principals. We have over 520 employees. And to give you a sense of that growth, when I joined Barry Dunn in 2007, I was number 175. The last person that joined my group, the valuation group, was in June of 19. He was employee 399. And so from June of 19, we've gone from just under 400 to over 520 employees. That kind of growth puts us in as one of the top 100 firms, accounting firms in the US, and we've been on that list since 2011. We've also been voted one of the top accounting firms for women. In terms of what those services look like what is it that we do, there's a wide range of services that we offer. On the assurance side, it's everything from audits, reviews, looking at cost reports for those that are in the healthcare sector. On the tax side, a whole suite of services, and then a lot of depth on the consulting side, including my group valuation there, hanging out at the bottom. Because this is a Moreda event, I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about where we can be found and where we're going. So our Barry Dunn offices right now, we're in Bangor, Portland, down in Manchester, New Hampshire, Waltham, just outside of Boston, Glastonbury, Connecticut, Charleston, West Virginia, and Phoenix, Arizona. We just recently completed doubling our space in Waltham. Last year, we doubled our space in Phoenix, Arizona. The year before that, we had a major increase to our footprint in Charleston, West Virginia. Our Bangor office recently moved into a new location. They had been located right along the river. They moved to a new facility, which is fantastic. Our Manchester office relocated about 3 years ago. And all of that, so starting with Manchester 3 years ago, we've been building up to this big event, which you have likely read about. So we are in the process of having our new national headquarters built out. That will be at 2211 Congress Street. You may know it better as the old Unum headquarters building. We're taking on over 80,000 square feet of space there on one floor. And it's really designed to serve us in our current needs and where we're anticipated to continue to grow. So I said 80,000 square feet on one floor. We're also going to have a large training center with 3 large rooms that can be interconnected or reconfigured in a variety of different ways. We have some boardroom capacity, meeting room capacity. We're anticipating having those facilities available to members of the community to use as well. And large common areas that have been modified with some architectural elements so that we can break up some of that space. But we know that even though we're in this mode now, we know that at some point we're going to be coming back into an office, and collaboration is incredibly important to us as an organization. The other thing I want to point out as we're looking at this list is prior to COVID, remote employees were our second largest office. We had over 50 remote employees at the time. Soon after, I think it was Friday the 13th in March, we quickly became 100% remote workforce. So we now have 520 some people working remote at any one time. So a lot of rapid upgrades to the back end of our IT infrastructure. It has been working very well for us, and but we are very much looking forward to when we can move into more of a hybrid sense. I want to build off of one thing that we heard prior. Stop sharing here. And that was when we were talking about quality of life and interns. One of the things that we're working toward rapidly at Barry Dunn is we've got a great internship program, and we continue to build on that. We are looking forward to a time when all of our entry-level employees are going to come into us as interns. We think it's a fantastic opportunity for people to get a sense of us, and also for us to get a sense of who those people are. And so that's one of the things in the Focus Maine where we're 100% on board with. Actually, we're on board with pretty much everything that they're pushing toward, but the internship programs in particular and that focus is something that we're looking forward to, and is an important part of our strategy moving forward. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Andrea.
Thank you very much, Seth. That's a great story about Barry Dunn's growth. Let's move over to Scott now while Bree finds her way back onto the program.
Perfect. So as I said before, I am the acting CEO and the CFO for two companies in Guilford, Maine. Puritan Medical Products is our bigger operation that we've had, which a lot of you have probably read about in the news recently. What we are is, at our heart, we're a swab manufacturer when it comes to Puritan. And this year has been very interesting for us because as a registered product and FDA guidelines and going through and making these specimen collection devices, when COVID hit, we were very quickly identified as the only manufacturer in the United States that makes all of these different types of swabs. So some of our numbers that we're going to talk about here from these slides are not that old, but they have become much larger, and I'll address that as we go through, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we've been doing and how we've been doing that. But we are still a family-owned company. We're privately held, and for the longest time we were operating in one location. And this year, as everything changed, we very quickly had to change to make new decisions about how we were going to successfully operate in the market. I think it's important, though, first to look a little bit about our background. We are two companies, and the company itself was started in 1919 as a toothpick manufacturing company in Michigan. They made one product, mint-flavored toothpicks, and then we moved into Maine because of the raw materials that were here. We are in the forest area, and we use almost exclusively white birch for the wood processing. And there was a lot of that in Guilford, Maine. So the family moved from Michigan, came to Maine, and started operating, making toothpicks. Over the course of years, there were a lot of changes to what we did. We added ice cream sticks and tongue depressors and wooden applicators that are used for medical swabs, and then started making medical swabs. We started making a wooden handle with a cotton tip that everyone's seen before, that they're used in doctors' offices. And then we continually adapted by working with our customers, by understanding the market, and expanded from those wood and cotton swabs to swabs that are, the number of them is huge, but every variety you've seen, whether it's for taking a sample to see if you have COVID, to a flu swab, to a wound cleaning device, all of those things are made at our factory in Guilford and have been being made there for at least 30 or 40 years. And as the years gone by, we've adapted. In the mid-90s, we restructured our company so that there were both hardwood products and Puritan medical products. And as I mentioned before, we are the largest employer in Piscataquis County. Our new expansion into Pittsfield and Somerset County is probably going to add roughly 500 to 600 employees in that area in our 2 manufacturing plants. And throughout all of this, we are still a family-owned business. It's a great success story when you look at most family businesses don't make it past the 2nd generation. And we're in the 3rd and 4th generations being involved in this company at 101 years old. That's always been in Maine. All of our operations are in Maine, and almost all of our employees are all located here in the state of Maine. A little more about what we do, the types of products. There are at least 65 different types of swabs that we make, and from those, it gets into the unique items of 1,200 or more. That's because for many of these large customers that you read about on the news, Roche, Hologic, Quidel, Becton Dickinson, Abbott, those are all our customers. We make swabs for them. So everyone that's trying to get more swabs out to test for COVID-19 right now, they're knocking at our door asking us to produce more. The over 12 million swabs produced per day is probably now up to 15 to 16 million a day. And by the end of March, it'll probably be 18 million, 19 million a day of our various different swab types. And that 5 billion a year is going to be probably 6.5 to 7 billion swabs a year. The biggest focus being specifically swabs that can be used for testing COVID-19. We'll be making about 1.8 billion of those per year. So that's enough for each U.S. resident to get tested up to 5 or 6 times a year, and to really help the economy get reopened. There are other markets also that we service. Right now, everything you hear about us is going to be related to the diagnostic field because that's where the need is. And we've really focused to make sure we're hitting that need. But we do have a lot of other customer bases and types of products. We make microbiology media, so the device, the liquid that will preserve samples to get it to the lab. We make a lot of forensic and genetic testing swabs that have specifically been processed and tested to make sure they have no DNA from anyone that's manufactured in any way, so that they can be done correctly. Environmental testing kits, a lot of these are used in food plants. When you hear about food plants having an outbreak of some bacteria, we're selling the swabs that they need to be using before they get that outbreak to identify if their cleaning is done right. Medical and veterinary, these are the real basic stuff that we've made for a long time: tongue depressors, wound care. There's a huge volume of that, and we service the largest distributors in the country for those products. And then the final one is controlled environments, where people don't think about swabs as much, but cleaning circuit boards and things of that nature. We make swabs that are specifically made for that, that don't have static and that work well in the marketplace. So that's kind of a general overview of what we do at Puritan and the products that we have been serving the market with.
That's great. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that story. You've had a lot of activity lately, and we're delighted that you were able to join us today. Bree, are you able to share your slides and give us an introduction to Atlantic Sea Farms?
Sure. So I'm the president and CEO of Atlantic Sea Farms. The company name is Ocean Approved, but our brand name is Atlantic Sea Farms, which many of you might be familiar with. We are a line-grown kelp company based in Saco, but we work with 24 partner farmers from Portland to Eastport. And our entire mission is dedicated around helping fishermen diversify their income stream in the face of climate change, while at the same time mitigating some of the effects of ocean acidification. So as some of you may know, the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of oceans in the world. And kelp can help us diversify our coastal income, our coastal economy at the time of increasing environmental volatility. So these are the faces of some of the folks that we work with. And what we really do is, what we're working with fishermen to do is help them get their leases, help them with technical assistance, farm design, site selection. And then what we do is we provide them with free seed that we create in our state-of-the-art nursery. And they then run that seed along lines in the water, usually around 4-acre farms, so very small. between the time of November is when the seeds go in, and then it comes out of the water between April and June. So this is a perfect side hustle for fishermen who are looking to diversify their income, but also have a winter income stream that usually isn't there. So what does a kelp nursery look like? On your right there, you'll see all these blue tanks. And that's the way that we actually grow seeds. And this is the seed spools that we give out. We then give them to our partner farmers. They run them along their lines. We then pick it up at the dock between April and June, bring it down to our processing facility in Saco, and then we turn it into 5 different products. These are some of our products that you might see in the store. We've been highly visible with companies like Sweetgreen and celebrity chef David Chang, who have really championed our product and brought them to their 120 locations across the country. High-level partnerships with folks like Legal Seafood or Be Good or Little Beet or Daily Harvest have really sort of promoted the Maine brand and the cleanliness of our fresh seaweed products. And has really sort of put Maine on the forefront of the growing kelp industry. In the past 2 years, I took over in 2018 as CEO. We've grown the line-grown kelp output in the state of Maine by 20 times. We are now putting around 800,000 pounds of kelp in the water that will be harvested between April and June, which is great both for the fishermen, but also has an additional impact, which is when we plant kelp and then remove it from the water, we're actually removing carbon and nitrogen from that water and reducing ocean acidification. So what ocean acidification does is still a question. There's still a lot of studies going on about what the major impact on the coast will be. But what we do know is with more carbon in the air, the ocean then absorbs that carbon, and it's definitely has a negative effect on shell-bearing organisms and phytoplankton, which is one of the primary suppliers of our oxygen. So by removing that carbon and nitrogen from the water, what we're doing is actually helping mitigate some of those effects of climate change. That's what we're doing here in Saco, Maine. We now have 9 full-time employees and 15 seasonal workers, depending on what we're doing at the time. We're producing here in our facility in Saco. We are moving, hopefully in the near future, whenever we can find tidal access. We've certainly grown out of our facility. But right now we are now distributing through Sprouts out west. We just opened our products to California on October 1st. And we'll be in Global Whole Foods on April 1st. So we're super excited about the progress. Obviously, COVID has hit us back in a major way. I know Amber shares some of the same issues, but in a different way, is that we were in food service, 90% in food service as of March of this year. Our harvest season was April through June. So our focus from a social mission perspective, and we're talking to a Maine audience here, is that, you know, we had to show up for these folks at the dock. We're the only buyer of any scale. And if we didn't show up at the dock, this kelp would have been dropped in the water and these folks wouldn't have had anywhere to sell it. So we were lucky to have been able to show up, buy every piece of kelp that they grew, and then put our heads down and find a different strategy. And so far, so good. And we've recruited some incredible people that have helped us grow that strategy into retail. And we've been really excited about the progress. I think one thing I'm really excited about is actually the growth of aquaculture here on the coast of Maine. We're seeing some really innovative companies. There's a company doing eel grow out from the elvers so that things aren't being moved. The elvers aren't being caught here and shipped to Japan and then back once they're grown out. We're seeing some incredible oyster companies, mussel companies from down east all the way down to Portland. And the coastal economy is really seeing incredible diversity that we haven't seen in more than 10, 15 years as we've been more and more siloed into a lobster monoculture. So the excitement is very real around aquaculture, especially when you're looking at shellfish and seaweed and seeing that we're not only providing a healthy food source for people, an economic viability that hasn't been seen for a while that helps preserve working waterfronts, but we're also improving water quality, removing carbon, cleaning the water, and it's a pretty amazing thing for Maine to be seeing, and really helps preserve our coastal heritage. So happy to talk any more about that, but that's a little bit about who we are.
Thank you very much, Bree, and thank you to all the panelists for introducing your companies, and I would say the passion that you each have that came through as you introduced your companies. a lot was said about Maine's competitive advantages. I'm trying to get centered here. Which way do I go? Yeah. And yet I want to make sure that we've fully explored that aspect. So Joshua Chamberlain, when he put together an economic development plan for Maine, he looked at what it had for natural resource assets. He had the waterways mapped. He enticed timber builders, timber harvesters to come in and not just harvest the timber, but also manufacture that timber. Focus Maine has looked at Maine's competitive advantages and identified a couple of sectors that have high potential for accelerated job growth. You've each talked a bit about those competitive advantages, but I want to just circle around one more time and really call that out, because that really does form the foundation of an economy for Maine that I think the word Kim Hamilton used was that's sticky to Maine. It couldn't be done. Another state couldn't replicate what you're doing because what you're doing is so related to the assets in Maine. So if I could circle around to each of you again and just have you call that out. Let's start with Amber, who actually has the name Maine in her company's name.
Sure. I think we've all hit on the importance of natural resources to our businesses. And it's not only, it's the basis of our raw materials, but it's also what attracts workers to live and want to work and stay and play in Maine. So, I grew up in Brunswick, but I know that when I got married and moved to Skowhegan, it was, I was sold on the idea that, we can pick apples 5 minutes from our house. We can live downtown, and my husband and I both can walk to work. And yet we still have a yard that we can fill our freezer full of raspberries every summer. And, it's a lovely place to be. And so while many of our rural communities have struggled, we do still have opportunities related to our natural resource history and the richness of our natural resources. Scott, your story about sort of the innovation and sort of forward progress with wood products is a bright light. And I would just share the same sentiment that part of what makes the revival of grain milling in central Maine possible is the fact that there are paper mill specialists, there are machinists and mechanics and folks that live near me that can diagnose machine problems by the acoustics of listening to a machine. So we have that skill set here that can be repurposed.
That's great. Scott, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I would add a little bit. We started concerned about the natural resource, and that's why the company is where we are in Piscataquis County. But as we've continued to grow, and especially in the last year where we're going to go from about 500 employees to 1,100 employees, we realized that the people that are in these areas are extremely hardworking. They're proud of the work that they can do. And when everything started in mid-March and we were getting phone calls from every branch of the US government and state governments, and everyone was looking for more, we had to find a way to make more product. And the only way we could do that was to try and have people work more hours. We did not force anyone to work overtime. That's a bad way to treat your employees. We asked for volunteers, and the volunteers we got, at some point we had to start asking people to not work as many hours. If they were able to work 7 10-hour days, they were working 7 10-hour days. We increased the overtime pay for them from time and a half to double time because we wanted to make sure they were being taken care of that way. But we had to go back we couldn't run 7 days anymore because people wouldn't not sign up for work. They knew that what we were doing was important. They knew there was a need in the country and wanted to make sure that everything that we could do was being done. And the only way we could make them not work 7 days a week for a lot of our people was to only run up to 6 days a week and make sure that people were able to get a day off. And all these workers that we're hiring in Pittsfield now, it's a slightly different market. We've already opened one factory where we've got over 300 employees. The announcement happened on Monday of our second factory that's going in that's going to add another 200 plus employees. And the workforce in these areas, they used to be a strong manufacturing base. A lot of the people haven't moved from when they worked at these factories that were refurbishing. And the people of those areas are very eager to do something, and they really feel a connection to helping the country right now. So we found that the people are really the biggest reason to stay operating in Maine. We could have opened our 2 new factories anywhere in the country. There was no restriction on what we were doing. We obviously were partnering with the federal government. They just wanted production up and running in Maine. And we found that by partnering with other Maine businesses and also hiring Maine employees, that we'd be able to get up and running and deliver what was needed for the country.
That's great. And I'm just going to interject a little story here. In addition to employing good Maine people, I think there's also a certain level of inspiration that's occurring around the community. So, Scott, in your case, a couple of weekends ago, I drove with my mother, 89-year-old mother, around Pittsfield to look at your new factories. And she said, I want to see that factory because I worked in that factory as a teenager, and I am so excited to see it being used again in a productive way. And there was just a sense of pride because she had once worked in that factory and it's being reemployed. Yep. And I think that that's shared among many people in the community. So that's really exciting. And Seth, you work with a different trained workforce. Do you want to speak to the workforce in your business and also any other stickiness that you have in Maine?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really attractive to Maine, well, for me personally, is I grew up here and moved away for a long time, wondering how or if I would ever get to come back. And so Barry Dunn offered me that opportunity, which is phenomenal. And so now I feel a sense of responsibility to create that opportunity for more people as well. But about half of our folks are consultants, meaning they're on the road quite a bit. And so work-life balance becomes a big issue, and the opportunity for them to come back and enjoy all of the things that Maine has to offer is a huge selling point. And it takes advantage of a lot of different things. It takes advantage of the natural resources that we have to offer, takes advantage of the high quality of life that we get to enjoy. It also makes us thoughtful of, some of the things that we have to do to keep those attributes in place. But it's also where, the location that I mentioned before of the headquarters, like being basically right next to the airport, is a huge asset for us. So it's giving people the opportunity to get in and out of Maine easily. It's giving them a sense of connection back to the larger whole. It's giving them a connection back to a firm that's deeply committed to the communities where we operate. And that is more and more important when you look at shifting demographics to millennials and younger. That sense of connection, sense of purpose is a key driver. And it's something that we need to be careful that our culture reflects that, so that we can continue to engender that kind of loyalty and support. The other thing I'd say is it's different a little bit, but not dissimilar from what Scott is talking about, is that Barry Dunn experiences relatively low, very low for our industry, turnover rate. And I think that talks to that Yankee ingenuity and work spirit that we all talk about, that when people get in, they want to do a great job. They take it seriously, and they expect to have people have their back and take care of them the same way they're going to take care of their employer.
That's great. Very well said. Thank you, Seth. And Bree, obviously, we have 3,000 miles of coastline in Maine, and not many states. I don't think any state can replicate that. California might come close. And you are taking full advantage of that. That is an advantage that's offered to your business. There must be other advantages that you're also seeing. I noticed that you mentioned the chef you're working with, at least the greater Portland area, and I think growing into the Saco Biddeford area is a foodie economy. Maybe that's one of them. But you could you just speak to this as well, the competitive advantages you're enjoying in your business?
So, I think the biggest advantage here in Maine is, like you said, the coastline, but the protected coastline in particular. There are bigger coastlines out there, but the fact that we have all these inlets that are super protective make it really easy for us to have low-cost farms. But I think more importantly, we often in Maine talk about this workforce challenges and finding the people to do the jobs. And in our case, we actually have a glut. When you think about it, we have 5,000 plus lobster license holders on the state of Maine. the majority of whom aren't fishing in the winter, the majority of whom have 1 or 2 or 3 sternmen, and they all have their own boats, and they all have their own ropes. So when you're talking about starting a farm in, let's say, Connecticut, you're talking $50,000, $60,000 just for the chains, the moorings, but then you have to buy a boat. When you think about Maine, this is pretty plug and play. There's investment that goes in the moorings, but then we find out some of the guys we're working with are like, oh, we're just going to lay our own moorings. I mean, like, some people have set up kelp farms for $2,000. It's insane how low cost they can make it because their knowledge of the water is just so significant. And what we've found is over the last 2 years, now that we work with 24 partner farmers, we do yearly mandatory networking meetings where everybody gets together and shares best ideas. And originally the idea is we'll talk about SOPs, we'll talk about the ways that people should be doing things, which we certainly have. But then at those meetings, they're like, you know what, I did this totally different thing than you guys recommended, and this is what worked. And then all of a sudden people are throwing out their iPhones and saying, look at how I set it up, and look at how I set it up. And they're innovating constantly. And because of that, we have the most innovative kelp farming setups that there are in the Western Hemisphere. And so that's really incredible. And that's really what we're looking to is this overqualified workforce on the water that no one can compete with. But also and I really, Scott, your story about working hard is really incredible and really inspiring to hear. And similarly, here on the coast of Maine, something that people value greatly, as any of us who've ever set foot in the state know, is integrity. And that's something that is deeply valued here. And the size of the state makes it such that people's integrity, if they violate that, it's known. So we have a really strong no jerk policy on the water where we work with the people that we know are really good. And it's very easy to find those people because their reputations precede them. And similarly, we're held to that same account. When we say we're going to show up and get people's kelp, we better damn well show up and get people's kelp. And we hold that very, very seriously. So what has happened over the course of the last 2 years is we've built up such a deep trust with our partner farmer network and vice versa, that it's not even a farmer network at this point, it's family. And in fact, sometimes literally family. My sales and marketing director, her uncle farms with us, her dad farms with us. They're both fishermen up in Spruce Head. You know, we really are able to, and that's something that only happens here in Maine, that your partner farmer will call you at 5 in the morning and just want to talk about how the kelp looks. You're like, cool, can you call me at 8? I do have 2 kids under the age of 5. I don't want to be up at 5, but you know, I think that that's something that is this kind of unspoken thing that we have here in Maine, is this value of integrity and honesty that you don't really find in other places in the same way. I'm not from here, I'm from away. And it's something I'm continually amazed with year over year, is just the high level of trust and honesty that you see in this workforce. And quite frankly, if people aren't trustworthy or honest, you know about it before you work with them, which is pretty amazing too. It's that the state is small enough to have those conversations.
Well, that's great. So it's both a combination of natural resources and the quality of our people and the quality of the life that we offer here in Maine. Are there state incentives or policies that you are taking advantage of, or you wish were in place to help you grow your businesses or help others in your sector grow? I asked that knowing when I read about Joshua Chamberlain, he made sure the railroad was built. He talked about, and Angus talked this morning about infrastructure. He also changed the law in Maine to incentivize banks to make loans to businesses locating in Maine. He actually increased the rate of interest paid on those loans, but that's the only way Maine businesses could get the loans. Banks weren't lending in Maine as much as after, at that time, Governor Chamberlain got that law passed. He also, by the way, passed and got some money to send someone over to Sweden to attract Swedes to come to Maine and start farming. So he was really doing all the things I think we're also trying to do now. But those are state policies and actions that he took to help grow the economy. Do your businesses take advantage of those? And I guess instead of staying with the same pattern, if someone wanted to just raise their hand because they'd like to go first, I'd love to switch it up a little bit.
As an ag-related business, some of our farm and food operations can find it difficult to get loans and financing through traditional banks. And we're very lucky to have had programs at the state level, like the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit program that identifies or that offers tax credits to private individuals that are willing to invest in the farm and food sector. So that's been very helpful for us, as well as I mentioned the Main Street program already that attracts support dollars from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, as well as mentorship. We have MTI, Focus Maine, coastal enterprises here in Maine that are in place to support entrepreneurs, and those are invaluable resources. And I would also just add, on the grassroots level, we are fortunate in Maine to have critical thinkers and folks with experience that have lent their effort around Slow Money Maine. So a grassroots network of business folks, investors, bankers that are trying to figure out how to make more patient capital and forms of investment available to entrepreneurs like myself. And so without Slow Money Maine, I would not be where I am today with our business.
Thank you. I don't know if everyone's heard about Slow Money Maine. Do you want to just say a thing or two about them?
Sure. It's not a bank. It's not a formal nonprofit, but it is a network. And Slow Money is a book that was written by an author by the name of Woody Tash, who was on the board of a nonprofit that began thinking critically about how the nonprofit was making more conventional investments to grow their endowment while turning around to make grants to small farms and food enterprises. And they sought to better align their investment values with the types of programs that they were trying to support. So it has, the book has really inspired chapters all across the country, including Maine, which has mobilized many millions of dollars at this point, just in a network that is trying to find patient forms of capital. And so patient might mean a lower interest loan from a private individual, or it might mean establishing a connection to a nonprofit in your community that can play the role of a fiscal sponsor along mission-aligned goals in order to funnel some charitable grant dollars through to startup businesses, and any number of creative solutions to find non-traditional forms of funding.
That's great. Thank you. And I think, Bree, you were going to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say there's really innovative programs here, like the work that MTI does, like Amber mentioned, which is innovation grants. I think, I think if I were to say one thing that is needed a little bit more, first of all, everything Amber said, I completely agree with. I think the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit and things like that are great. I think one thing I've seen a lot in Maine is a good support between the $10,000 and $15,000 grant range for very small businesses, and then support for very large businesses. Once you get into the middle-sized business range, you're sort of flat out, and that's a little bit, that's really where we're going to see some major growth here in the state of Maine, and where we're going to, in the food sector in particular. I think that with that, there is a lack in the food sector. There is a lack of money nationally available for research and innovation. There's, when you say, is there research and innovation money because you can't use investors' money for research and innovation. You can't get a bank loan for research and innovation. We're certainly not making enough money to put it into it. So what we're doing is we're constantly setting ourselves behind folks that are able to access that money, like in Alaska. And so if there was a little bit more of a focus on how the state can help prompt research and innovation, not through $10,000 grants, because that doesn't really do a whole lot, but grant support that can be at a higher realm. Like, for example, we would love dulse. It's a native seaweed here, but nobody's done it at scale to grow it in the water. We know that's a huge market. The people who are doing wild harvest are selling it really well. I can't, I probably need $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to start researching that, which means I'll probably never do it if I don't find the grant support to do it. So it's one of those things that I think that we could see a lot more investment in the middle range businesses at a higher level, especially in the R&D sector for food safety, product development, different growth strains, things like that, that could make Maine much more competitive in the food space rather than coming up with all the ideas and then watching other people pass us because they have the money for the R&D.
That's great. Thank you. You can all see me kind of going off screen. It's because I'm taking notes on this. As, you know, working with Marita's Public Policy Committee, these are real nuggets that I want to grab hold of. Seth, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, I want to just to build a little bit on what Bree was just talking about and then take it in a slightly different direction. But it seems like what that argues for is along the lines of what Chamberlain was doing and proposing and what Focus Maine is working on, and that is an expanded public-private partnership that's really focused on those couple of sectors. So, you know, Bree mentioned Alaska and some of the money they free up. You know, if you go into New York State, there is a lot of money that's pumped through the State University of New York system for agricultural co-ops to help with different crops in different sectors. You know, something along those lines could help free up innovation dollars to help drive the economy forward. With all the various aquaculture that's coming into the state, you know, that kind of focus would be phenomenal. What I was going to say, not so much from a state program perspective, but I'm also a board member at the Institute of Family-Owned Business. And Charlie was talking earlier about some of the demographic trends and also the business trends in Maine. And so Maine is the oldest state in the union and also has a disproportionately large number of privately held businesses. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, my day job, I spend a lot of time talking to people about succession planning and talking about what to do with their business and how to transition it effectively from one generation to the next. Because the large employers are phenomenal, but our economy is largely driven by a number of smaller businesses. And so retaining that base, retaining that employment base in the state is a big deal, and it makes a difference. And because of the pandemic and some other things, IFOB membership is free through the end of the year. So if you never have checked out IFOB and you're a family-owned business, I would encourage you to do so. If nothing else, what you'll find is an affinity group of people that you can share, probably not as exciting and interactive as Bree's Fishermen with the iPhones, but it'll still be a good conversation and hopefully some sharing of best practices and thoughts on how to strengthen the economic base here in Maine.
Thank you. Scott, anything you want to add on this topic?
Well, we've had a lot of public-private partnership, but none of it has been state level. Both of our major expansions we have that are going on right now have been partnerships with the U.S. government. The first manufacturing plant expansion, when they were first concerned about having enough testing supplies, the government went into a partnership with us where they paid to renovate our facility that we found, paid to have equipment built, and then we were going to be responsible for making sure we can find all the people, getting it staffed, and getting it up and running in a very short time frame. And that partnership was great. They gave us every resource we could get. They were able to get Bath Iron Works to stop making the DDG class destroyer they had and to make machinery for us, because we needed to get it done and we needed to get that capacity up. So there was a lot of partnership at the federal level, and we thought that it was fantastic. And we're finishing up this first plant, and then they said, no, we need you guys to do more, and we want to partner with you again. And instead of being Department of Defense money, it then became CARES Act money, which has been fantastic for us to allow to expand and grow with another manufacturing plant. Similar situation. They're paying for, we've purchased the building, they're paying for the renovations, and they're paying for most of the machinery and equipment that's going inside. And then we're going to make sure we have the people there and trained and ready to go, so that by the end of March, we're producing another 50 million swabs a month out of a new factory. And they have actually been way easier to work with than I expected. I thought it was going to be exceptionally difficult, because you're talking about large sums of money in government contracts, and it's a world that we don't operate in. We commercially produce products and we sell those. And when you get into dealing with the federal government and all these different rules and having project managers from different branches of the military, you start to learn pretty quickly. But I've also found that they have truly wanted to partner with us because everyone at all levels of the government has found that we can deliver, and Maine is uniquely positioned to be able to deliver on these things. And they're continuing to want us to do more. It's every week we get another phone call from someone at the government like, well, can we change what you were doing? Can we modify this? Can we do more? And most of it means more construction, more machinery, more employees. So we just try and continue, if it's humanly possible, we try and do that. And we're working with other great Maine businesses to make it happen. So the federal government partnership has been fantastic. There's not a lot of state programs that I'm aware of that would have had either the funding to do what we did or the ability to do it as quickly as we did. But the federal government has been fantastic.
Such a fascinating panel because we have such a variety of scale of companies that are speaking to us today. Thank you. Let's switch gears a little bit. I mean, it's wonderful here in Maine. We do have these great competitive advantages. There seem to be quite a few policies in the right places. It always could be more, I think, and I appreciate the thoughts that you've shared about those. What about challenges and headwinds that you or your sector are facing that you would like people to be aware of in the event there are things that we could do to help you overcome them? Bree, do you want to start?
Yeah. Sorry, I keep flipping this in and out. I'm not in a closed door office. All my staff is in the other side of the building. But the big thing for us is, I mean, obviously COVID for us individually as a business, as a food business, I think every food business is dealing in one way or another, either with a shortage, a labor supply issue, or food service issue with food production here in Maine. But something down to the aquaculture level that we're seeing, and I think would be particularly interesting to this audience, is we're seeing pushback by riparian landowners on getting aquaculture leases in the water near their house. And the concern is for folks that they're seeing they don't necessarily want to see a mussel raft or an oyster farm in front of their home. And that is not one of the reasons that a lease can be denied, but those riparian landowners can make it very difficult for the industry to grow. And it's sometimes just absolutely ludicrous, frankly. I mean, our kelp farms are 7 feet underwater. They go in November till June. People aren't even, the summer homes aren't even there at that time. But also the stuff that is there, like the mussels and the oysters and in the fish farms, like these places, this is working waterfront. This is what people come to Maine for. Everyone likes the idea of seeing the lobstermen drive by in the middle of the day. But they'll also often be the first ones to complain when they hear that lobster boat at 4 in the morning. But it is who we are. That's why people should be coming to Maine. It's why I love this state, is that we have a real working waterfront. We have real people working every day in and out with our natural resources and conserving their own water and their own land. And I think if we could get out more education about what aquaculture is doing for the state and how it is improving the water and why it's good for the country, who's importing more than 90% of their seafood from God knows where, you know, to have this here in the state of Maine and for it to be an economic driver is incredibly important. So I think particularly for this audience to take with them, you know, questions about that people have about the Maine aquaculture industry. We have a great trade organization, Maine Aquaculture Association. I'm biased because I'm on the board, but I think it's an awesome organization that does a lot of incredible advocacy for our industry. We have Kim from Focus Maine, who's done an incredible job helping drive the industry forward. GMRI, Island Institute. Talk to any of these organizations and you'll find that they're all advocates for the growth of the aquaculture sector in a very significant way. And the way it's growing is inspiring as hell. These are a lot of fishermen, a lot of people who work on the water, people from these communities making significant impacts, positive impacts on their communities and in the water. And to get that stricken down by someone who wants to have a clear view from their giant house for the 3 weeks a year that they're there is beyond frustrating. So being able to have that conversation of those of us who live here full year round and those who are advocates for it in the summer to really kind of help educate on how important this is for us to continue to thrive and to preserve working waterfronts is really important.
Thank you, Bree. You've obviously thought about this a lot and experienced it a lot. Somebody else? Anybody else?
So some of the challenges go ahead, Scott.
Okay. With us, our biggest challenge is becoming now different than it was before, but we're trying to expand our workforce very rapidly. When you talk about trying to hire 500 to 600 employees in rural Maine, it is a problem. It's very difficult. We're trying to reach out further. We're trying different techniques for getting people to work in these areas. And I'm someone that I grew up in Cape Elizabeth. I'm from Southern Maine. I've moved north now twice in my life. I'm going the opposite direction that everyone else is. And honestly, when I moved to Dover Foxcroft 10 years ago, I thought, yeah, this is probably going to last a year or two, and we're going to not be able to adjust. But the areas of the state that we're operating in are beautiful, and there's lots of outdoor activities and opportunities for people to do things. But we just need some sort of assistance from the state to get people back to Maine. People have seemed to leave. Everyone that I went to high school and college with, the vast majority of them have moved away. And we've got this kind of brain drain that's going out of the state. And the more of those people that we can have come back in, the more we can do. We're having to highly automate our production facilities in these new facilities because we can't get enough people to do it the way we used to. And there's some innovation there, and it's going to be great for us long term. But we also are a large company that can support a lot of employees, and it's getting harder to get those people. We struggled a lot this summer as people had their enhanced unemployment, and we were trying to hire people for a brand new factory. It became a little bit of a barrier. And I know that was a federal program instead of the state, but if the state can find a way to encourage people back to work or encourage people to come back to the state, or even if you're in a more urban area and there aren't the jobs you're looking for, to find a way to encourage these people to maybe move inland. There's lots of beautiful things on the north side of, or the north and west side of I-95, and people a lot of times just forget about it.
Yeah, boy, if anyone could tour Greenville, Maine and Moosehead Lake area, that should convince them. That's not too far from Guilford. Yeah. Amber, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I would just say two things. Building on what Scott said, the opportunity in rural communities like ours are our natural resources and our workforce that is hardworking, that has skill sets that they may have used in other industries. The downside of that is that the loss of some of the industry over the years, whether it's woolen mills or Skowhegan's toothpick and tongue depressor factory, is that there are families living in poverty here that are still struggling with basic human needs. So whether that's shelter or food or childcare or housing, some days as the CEO of my company, I am trying to help people find housing, or we are negotiating days off of work to deal with challenges at home. And the choice to invest in childcare for children or stay employed is a real one. What's the trade-off? Am I going to work just to turn money over to take care of kids? So, there are there's a lot of social policy that could support Maine's entrepreneurs and business climate. The one other one that I think we're doing a good job addressing with the support of Focus Maine and Maine Technology Institute and others is acknowledging, at least in farm and food, that we are operating at a different scale than some of the farms in the Midwest, which is where our grain industry went and many other food production. And frankly, the geography is different. So, you can build a combine right now with a huge harvesting head that doesn't need an operator and can be set using GPS technology to harvest acres and acres and acres of grain at one time. In Maine, that's different. We have hills and rocks and smaller farm sizes. And so the infrastructure costs and just the presence of appropriately scaled infrastructure can be a challenge, but that is starting to be addressed now so that farmers are well equipped in order to serve our scaling businesses. So I think we need to keep doing more with that and addressing pinch points as they come up.
Great. Thank you very much. Apparently, Seth has lost power. He'll join us back when he can. I'm going to switch gears again and ask you if in your business that you're in today, is there anything that totally surprised you that was just totally unexpected that somehow caused you to make changes in your business or make a change to your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think what has surprised me is that what we're doing is working. I know that seems like really crazy to say, but like we had this crazy idea of being like, I'm going to make fresh seaweed and I'm going to provide this as an alternative income source for fishermen and people are going to eat it. Like that's actually kind of crazy. And it's working. And it's like, to me, that actually every day is exciting that like doing the right thing actually works. And we've really worked hard to make our product super approachable and super tasty. And we just won a number of different awards that that are really important in natural foods, like the Natural Food Expo, Best New Product, Best Mission-Based Company, Sophie Award for Best New Product. Like this is stuff that's just for taste, not just the social mission. And what we know is that the social mission will drive the first purchase, but if they don't like the food, they won't come back. And so seeing that we pulled that off with seaweed. I mean, it's not like people don't go out into the ocean and they say, ooh, yum, clams, ooh, yum, oysters. They don't just like pull out a thing of sugar kelp and go, yes, I'm gonna cook this tonight. That's just not the American palate. And we're trying to make it the American palate by making it much more approachable. So for me, that's actually been, I mean, obviously a pleasant surprise, but we've always called it the experiment. You know, let's see if this works. Let's see if we can do the right thing and make it work. And also then, you know, we felt like we were at the top of the hill. There was a giant billboard in Times Square with David Chang holding up like eat Atlantic Sea Farms kelp at Sweetgreen. And then Times Square was closed 3 weeks later. Nobody was there. It felt like we got to the top of the hill and then got immediately pushed down. We've been able to recover. And I feel like this is just all because we're sitting here in Maine and surrounded by people who believe in what we're doing. Most of our investors are from Maine. They're people who have believed in something when they didn't have anything to believe in other than like a leader that said something was going to happen and knowing that it was the right thing and going on a Women of Prayer that this was actually going to work. And so I think without this amazing state and without the amazing network of being able to call Bristol Seafood in the middle of the harvest season and say, our freezer space doesn't work, can we use yours? And they like immediately drop things and put our kelp in their freezer. I mean, it's this network and this community has made everything we're doing possible. So that's been to me the biggest, not surprise, but just constantly kind of like shaking and pinching myself to be so lucky to be in this place.
That's great. And great. If somebody wanted to take that first social mission and buy your product, where could they find it? And you know, how could we help support you at the market?
Yeah, so most of the same places you can buy Amber's, but it's kind of all in the natural grocery stores here, Whole Foods, and then the same all the way down the East Coast. And then, like I said, we just released it to California on October 1. So if you're out in California and stop in the store and it's not there, ask your grocer to bring it in. And I know Amber would probably have the same comment. If you're going into a grocer and you don't see our products, tell your grocer you want them. But you can also buy it online, although it's more helpful for us if people go to the store and make sure that people know that it's valued on the shelf.
Perfect. Thank you for that little tidbit. Amber, did you want to add to this one about something that totally surprised you, might have changed how you're doing your business?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we started building our business plan, one of the first things I read was the Brookings report of 2006 and some of the recommendations for Maine and trying to figure out does our idea fit into what's good for Maine and how Maine should be growing. And they talked a lot about cluster development in that report. If you remember, then they were talking about fisheries clusters and tech clusters. But, you know, we looked at grains and we said, well, this is a cluster. I mean, we're going to be incorporating farms and we need grain for food and feed and beer, and dairy farmers need grain for straw bedding in their barns. And so, you know, we are a cluster. And so to Bree's point, it has worked, and it's surprised me how well it's worked. Really, the ecosystem that forms around this infrastructure is strengthening all parts, but it incorporates far more people than I imagined initially. So whether it's my local printer here in Skowhegan who can buy the new $10,000 machine because now it's worth it because he can produce our rolls of stickers, or it's the mushroom farm that finds utility in our byproducts, like the oat hulls. They can grow mushrooms in them commercially, or the oat hulls can be used by the compost company in Unity that is making a soil medium for farmers to start their seedlings. It's far and wide, and I've just been so heartened by this ecosystem that forms around a mill. It pretty much our second year in business. I hadn't really built the business plan for oatmeal, for oats. We were thinking about flour for bakers mostly, but it stood to reason that oats grow so well in our climate. They like it cold and moist, and oats are a common cover crop for our potato growers. So we made some pretty immediate changes right out of the gates to invest more machinery and purchases, and dedicate a whole line in our building to oat production, to be able to meet demand there. And it has only made us more efficient and be able to produce more inside the facility that we're in. So.
Terrific story. Thank you. Seth, anything you want to add about what might have surprised you in your business?
Well, I'll just hit a quick one on some of the challenges. As we just experienced, a more robust power and internet infrastructure would be welcome. So apologies for bonking out for a second there. I think one of the things that has surprised us is in Maine, it seems like it's easy to take that longer view. And I don't know if that should be surprising or not, but it's one of the things, like when we talk about expanding our new national headquarters, there are a lot of people who are thinking about what do they need to do for right now. And in Maine, and I don't know if it's a sense of place, but it seems to encourage us to take a longer view on some of these things. And so, we committed to keeping our internship program up and running, even as we went to 100% remote. We know that we're going to be using that space at 2211. And so I think the other thing that surprised us, and it's not so much about doing business in Maine as just through this pandemic, was how incredibly resilient our workforce is and how incredibly lucky we are to have the clients that we have to work with. And it may help that we've all been going through this together, but people have been incredibly understanding about the need to shift schedules around, or where things happen that are out of our control. My wife's a school nurse, so we spent a couple days in quarantine that we weren't expecting to. Probably a pretty common story amongst those that are listening. And so it's just that sense of taking the long-term view that we know that we will get through this and emerge stronger. And then all the work that folks here on the panel and some of the other folks we've heard from are doing to make sure that the Maine economy is stronger and that we come out of this position for success, position for growth, is just phenomenal.
Right. Thank you. Scott, anything you want to add?
Yeah, we have probably two things that I say surprised us this year. The first one was related to the projects and stuff that we kind of undertook without knowing, okay, how are we going to get this done? But we found there's a lot of other really good, strong businesses in Maine that will work with you. We partnered on both of our construction projects with Chinbro, who we hadn't done any work with before, but had a former coworker of ours that was working there and had a connection. And we're able to come up with a plan to build a factory in 2 months. We've got another plan. We're building another factory. It's going to be like a 5 month, or no, like 3 or 4 months for the construction on that one. But when you have two big driven Maine companies working together, you can really achieve a lot. And most people that haven't been involved in construction or manufacturing, to what we did in 2 months to get a plant up and running, to be producing 20 million nasal swabs a month for testing for COVID, in most cases would take 16 to 18 months. So we did it extremely fast, and it is, as you saw, it's a beautiful facility. The quality of the products is amazing. We've got great people there. The other thing that I guess it shouldn't have surprised me, but it just kind of confirmed some things. We had always said that we were the worldwide leader with all of these products, and that our products were better than our competitors, higher quality, worked better. But it's really hard to get data to support that in a lot of cases. As we've been going through the pandemic, though, our suppliers are having to try and second source items, not because they want to, but because we can only ramp up so fast. And we've had major suppliers tell us that they've gone through 4 or 5 different companies trying to find someone to second source a swab, which most people think of as an extremely uncomplicated device. There's a lot more to it than just looking at a Q-tip. But they can't find someone else to supply a product that works, that will do that. So it confirmed our thought process that yes, we are the leader in this, and that we do make great quality products, and that all the efforts we've put in are worth it, because it's now helping, and it's bringing more business to us, because as new companies come into the market and want to make a swab, they're coming to Puritan and saying, hey, how can you help us? How can we work together to do these things?
That's terrific. That's terrific. These are great stories. 2 more questions. This next to the last one, I think Seth kind of touched upon this already, but what excites you about the future of Maine's economy and your business, or one or the other? Like what gets you all juiced up about what's coming?
You know, there's so much I'm excited about. I think one of the things is and maybe this is the start of it. I think one of the challenges we face as a state is we're so good at being humble and paying attention to our own work and not really touting our successes. We need to talk more about all the opportunities that exist here. And one of the things I'm excited about is, with the Roos Center and some of these other things that are coming online, with, you look at what Abbott Labs is doing and what Puritan is doing. Some of the huge successes that we're having right off the bat with this innovation economy around medical devices. I think the state is positioned really well. We just need to continue to tell that story. And the biggest challenge there for us and others is attracting people to the state. So showing them that there's a deep enough economy and showing them that there's opportunity for them here, as opposed to, stopping somewhere well south of here.
Thank you. Amber, anything you want to add to that?
Sure, a couple of things. One is, as it relates to grain, 0.5% of the grain grown nationwide is organic. 0.5%. And so the focus of what we're doing in Maine is organic grain production. Organics are outpacing the growth of all other foods in commercial grocery stores. I think we are well positioned in Maine to focus on the right way to farm that leaves us with sustainable soils to farm into the future. I'm excited about those opportunities and the increasing recognition of that here in Maine. I also think that there's just untapped opportunities, and we're starting to see others capitalize on them now, but things that could be value added from our products, our core products here in Maine, whether it's pizza dough or beer or other things made from our local products. Those companies are starting to pop up, and there's more opportunity to show that those products can be made from local things. The pandemic is really creating a situation where there are certain words that we will never think of the same again, like pivot and essential. And I think what we're finding in Maine is that we provide a lot of essential goods and services. And this is an opportunity for the market to see that. And we've certainly, at the same time that we lost our biggest customer, in an urban area, a restaurant chain, that hole was more than filled with people in their homes purchasing online to make sure that their pantries were stocked with flour and grains and beans. And so that is not going to go away anytime soon, and it's a real opportunity for Maine.
That's great. Scott, can I jump to you for that one? What excites you about the future?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that's exciting us right now is trying to play a huge role in helping the entire economy right now. Our products are the most basic component of all the testing kits that are out there from every manufacturer. You mentioned Abbott. We supply them with all their swabs. There's a lot of other ones, and it gives a real sense of purpose to the work we're doing, and allows us to feel better about the number of hours that we're putting in to try and get things done, because this is a huge problem nationwide, and we're trying to solve it from Piscataquis and Somerset County in Maine. We're excited about the outcomes we're getting. We're excited about when we see the number of tests that are able to be done. We're really excited about some of the new products Abbott has going to put test kits in every school nationwide, so that we're going to be able to get our kids back in school. And we didn't always think of ourselves as having that type of impact. And it's really humbling when you start looking at it and say, geez, you know what, we're doing great things here. And it keeps us all motivated to do the work we're doing.
That's terrific. And Bree, over to you.
I feel like there's a few things that we can call COVID language, like Amber was just saying, like, are you on mute might be one of them, because I feel like I'm constantly on mute when I try to talk. I think for me, one thing that's very exciting is that we do have a lot of, we often talk about the age problem in Maine and the shifting demographics in Maine. And I think that there are some industries, I think all four of us represent them, where we're starting to see young people from Maine coming back a little bit more and reversing some of that brain drain that you were talking about earlier, Scott. I believe it was you, Scott. And I think that's particularly true, at least what I'm seeing in aquaculture. And I think it's probably true a lot in agriculture as well, that we're seeing that this kind of reinvigoration around coming back to Maine and working the land and working the water. And I think that's really exciting to bring some innovation back to the state that actually, you know, often it's Mainers. My husband's from Maine. And no matter where we went in the world as a diplomat, I was always hearing about how Maine was better until I finally relented and he was right. And I think that you're seeing that with a lot of people who grew up here and a lot of people that are moving back. Everyone that I've hired here, maybe one or two exceptions, are Mainers that were looking for their way back. And they're all millennials and they're excited to be here doing something really innovative. So that gives me a lot of hope as we have been talking for years about this demographic shift. And I think possibly COVID might be a benefit of COVID if we have to find benefits, because we always have to see some good in everything, right? And it's a horrible tragedy. It's a horrible pandemic for the world. But for Maine, what we might find is that some people who have always been looking for that kick in the butt to come back and move away from the cities and come back to Maine are actually doing that. And I think that could be something that's really exciting.
Well, thank you. So my last question is, turn over to the audience a little bit. Do you have any lessons that you would like to share with the audience, lessons learned from where you sit in your business? We have two entrepreneurs here. We have a professional services accountant, and we have a leader of a manufacturing center. And so if you were to advise the audience that's listening, who are comprised of a number of different people around the state, you know, what one or two lessons might you that you've learned, might you share with them if they're looking at what they might do next?
We've been talking a lot to business owners and different audiences using the tide shift as an analogy, which Bree, you'd probably like. So maybe I should send those slides over to you, because one of the things we're used to in Maine is a tide shift. You know, a 10-foot tide shift's not that uncommon. And so you have to be built to be able to take that swing. And it leads us to having a lot of conversations about resilience. So if you've got a business that's built only to do well for you, or only to make money, you know, 1 or 2 months out of the year, or only really perform when the economy is humming, it's time to rethink that strategy. It's time to look at what can you do to be more resilient so that you're built for the swing. One thing that we know, or I know because we've studied it, is the economy is on like a 10-year cycle. And if you think about it, we're about 10 years out from the global financial crisis, the last recession. So every time we come to the end of a decade, we start to wonder what's going to happen. And So it's time to position and to start thinking about that. Like, how do you build resilience and sustainability into your organization?
Amber, can I tap you next?
Sure. I would just say that I've learned along this path that there are a lot of organizations and individuals out there to help. If you don't like the tools available to you or they're not working for you, devise new ones. That new legal structures or new financial or governance models, that just may very well be where some of the innovation in Maine is at. That plenty of other folks have eyes on us to help teach them. So, I did not walk into my business knowing all that I needed to know to run this business. And I have come to see that that has served me in my favor because I have fresh eyes and a fresh look at how I might like to do this. And there are still things that keep me up at night that I wish there were different solutions for, and I'll keep working on those so that we can grow and scale and stay in Maine.
Thank you very much. And Scott?
I think the biggest piece of advice I'd give is to be a very strong partner to those other businesses that you work with in Maine and everywhere else. But we've been able to be successful through this because of partnering with a lot of different businesses in Maine. There have been professional services firms, there have been construction companies, there have been insurance providers, and every one of those Maine-based businesses that we've worked with has moved heaven and earth to make sure that we could be successful in what we're doing, and we try and return that with them with loyalty and support. But there's a lot of great companies in Maine, and none of us can do what we're trying to do on our own. But getting those great partners, and especially within the Maine business community, we're a small state when it gets to the business community, but we have a lot of great people. And trust those people and treat them like they are truly partners in your business, even though you don't share a financial connection in those things.
Terrific. And Bree?
I was going to say adapt, the ability to adapt quickly, but Amber sort of said that, which I agree with everything you said, Amber. I think especially in this current world and with any business, adaptability is primary. But I think also in Maine, working in Maine and finding a business of Maine, figure out what the strengths are of this place and amplify those rather than trying to run, a New York business out of Maine. That's not how it works. I think we have so many strengths here. And I think the places that really survive are doing exactly what everybody, Seth and Scott and Amber have already mentioned, which is resilience and working with the people around you. And I think that is something that's the strength of this place. And if we can all take advantage of that and build businesses around that, we'll find ourselves to be in good places.
That's great. Well, thank you. That's going to close this section of the program. And just before we turn it back to Josh Fifield to close out the whole program, first, great big thanks to each of our panelists. I liked it this morning when Josh clapped, even though he was all alone. You can imagine the whole audience clapping for you now. You've certainly earned that. And it's been my absolute pleasure to moderate this panel, to get to know each of you better in the preparation and delivery of the presentations this morning. It's also been my pleasure to serve in this capacity for the conference committee that Craig and Shannon run for Merida, and always my pleasure to serve as a public policy advocate for Merida. Obviously, as Merida knows, a strong economy in Maine is a strong and responsible real estate sector in Maine, and that is the connection and why they wanted to have this panel discussion today and the whole program today. So thank you for your contribution to that, not just on the panel, of course, but every day in what you're doing. With that, we'll close this section and we'll go over to Josh, and thanks again.